Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of DigiBuild, April Moss. April, thanks for joining me today.
Dan, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation. Before we get started, just introduce yourself. Who is April today?
Yeah. So today I am the co-founder of DigiBuild, which is a software for construction that does all the bid order and tracking of your materials. We're looking to be the largest global supplier of suppliers in the world, including the largest sustainable supplier. And then I also have another organization called the Construction Technology Institute, where I bring all different types of parties from the construction industry, and we figure out how to solve problems and issues for that industry, build out tools, resources, training, whatever it takes to really impact the lives of those in the construction industry and give them more opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. So, looking forward to this conversation because I do have in another lifetime, I had some experience in the building materials industry as on the sales side, so familiar with construction, and the chaos that can roll around that. So tell me a little bit about, um, you know, what made you go down this path? Because it's not like you've been in construction entire life. So,
Right.
tell me what launched you on, this rewrite of April, so to speak.
Yeah. So, my background is in the consumer products goods organizations. Like I did a little bit of real estate early on in my life, and I worked for Construction Specifications Institute, a trade association for a couple of years. But really, my world's working with Procter Gamble, Starbucks. I worked for a large brokerage. But I've always had this interest in construction because my dad was a subcontractor. He did finish work, cabinetry, just really good at what he did, super creative, loved that work. But the construction industry is really tough on people. It's the second or third largest industry of suicides. And so, there's this whole culture that sometimes you have work, sometimes you don't. If you're the little guy, you're probably the last person to be paid. I just remember there was times in the winter where my dad didn't have work. He would try doing reupholster work, whatever he could to get scrappy at providing for his family. But I remember us closing off all the rooms in our house and living in the kitchen because at least we had our stove that we could live by the fire. So it's pretty rough growing up. But when he had work, it was amazing. His mental health was there. Everything was really good. But in the industry, people get into the drink culture and sometimes into the drug culture because they're just trying to survive and handle the emotions of that ebb and flow of not being able to provide for their family. And so I had a lot of passion for that industry. And at Procter Gamble, the CEO of DigiBuild, Robert Salvador, he worked for me for a while. He took a break from construction. He's been in construction since he was a little boy working with his dad. And we decided that maybe this is a place that I could play because he's seen me grow huge teams for these other companies and run operations. My last position at P&G was running North America operations for their second largest customer team. So that's how I got into construction. And for there, we started looking at, what are the needs in the construction industry. And blockchain is something that became interesting to Rob because he was in crypto, and blockchain is kind of the basis for crypto. It's just very secure, very transparent. And knowing that all these 150 people come together on one project, and there's always this distrust in construction. I'm sure you've seen it as well. I think suppliers probably have it the easiest because they're like, we're not delivering your product till you pay us, right? But everybody else in the industry, it's a really tough, non-transparent non-transparent industry. And so he took that and said, you know what, if we had blockchain as our basis, it would be easy for us to identify who said what, when, was it delivered, wasn't, when it was delivered, and bringing all those pieces together. So it was really, this amazing idea of how to help everybody in the industry drive transparency. That's kind of where it began as far as how I got into DigiBuild.
And I think one of the things, just apart from what you're doing in the business, I think this is a great testimony of the fact that we as humans can reinvent ourselves and and change careers and, be successful in two totally different realms, so to speak. So,
Yes.
how important do you think that is for, for the listeners out there to understand that, just because you started a career down one path, that
Mhm.
is not the only path. You're never too old or too young or anything else to shift gears and still be successful. I mean, how important of a message do you think that is for
I,
the listeners?
I so appreciate that question because I get that quite a bit. How does someone who's worked for these major CPG top, 100, consumer products good company and a retail get into construction and software and startup? Because there's no infrastructure. You are the infrastructure, right? Your HR, your operations, your selling, your accounting. So whatever that looks like. And I think it's that core, right? First of all, I grew up with my mom really teaching hard work ethics. So that's why I appreciate your story so much, as my mom was a powerhouse. After my father committed suicide, I mean, she held us accountable. We learned, what the value of a dollar was. We had to, get jobs. I remember when I was 8 years old, you couldn't do this today just because of the, unfortunately, but I would take my little sled in the wintertime, and my stepdad had these molds to build candles. And if I gave him like 25 cents per candle, then I could build these candles out and go sell them. And I had my little sled that I'd take it around and knock on doors and sell my little candles. So, and then we would learn that at work ethic. And so I'd say that it's the people around me that taught me those things. My grandmother had a major influence in my life about ethics and working hard. I have an aunt who ran a little country store, and she was the first female butcher in the state of Michigan. So just I learned a lot from her about business. She would bring me in, and I didn't want to go hang out with my cousin. I wanted to hang out with my aunt because she had this big green bar paper she'd give me, and I'd pretend like I had my own store and, pretend I was calculating stuff. So I learned a lot about business and retail from her, which was absolutely amazing. But at the core, the two things that impacted me the most, as far as my own skill sets, was um, learning about your strength finders. There's a book out there, and it's Mark, and I can't remember his name, but anyway, you go out and it kind of hones in on what your strengths are. So many times we focus on what we can't do versus what we've been gifted to do. And so when that one little test, that one little book really impacted and framed who I was as far as what I could do. And then the second piece was emotional intelligence. So that self-awareness is the first step in emotional intelligence. And so that strength finders really help me be aware of what I'm good at and what I'm not, and being honest about it, right? And also being honest. A lot of time we tell ourselves lies about, oh, you can't do that. Maybe that's just not your strength. Stop beating yourself up. But also there's other lies that we tell ourselves. Well, I couldn't do that because of X. So being honest with yourself about even when you make mistakes and learning from them. And I feel like this is a big thing that a lot of young people today are learning. They don't know who they are. They have been framed by what other people tell them, about what social media tells them. A lot of people are from generations of that now, right? And so just understanding, what can I do? And then those principles are timeless. Those skills are timeless. So moving from a massive, construction CPG world into a startup, those skills, those cores are still the same. And of course, you have to learn, you have to put some time into understanding a new business. But for me, it's been game changing, and it's really just solidified for me more about I can pretty much do anything and build anything. As long as I understand my own skill sets and how I'm going to utilize those in that new world.
Yeah. Yes. It seems like you always have had that entrepreneurial spirit, even though you were in corporate America for a long time. So, I
Yes.
think that's another great lesson is there are things that, you can learn at a young age that
Hmm.
you may not use immediately, but it will stick with you. And just, you talk about your aunt and being around her and that influence, all these years later, how that those lessons are now coming to fruition. So I think
Yes.
that's a
Yep.
great story is just that people need to understand that,
Mhm.
you're always learning stuff for a reason, even though you may not use it tomorrow, you may use it 6, 10, 20 years So I love that is sticking with.
Lifelong learner, right? You've
Yeah,
always got to have that curiosity, never lose it, never lose curiosity. I think you're spot on. And it's funny because at Procter and Gamble, they called me the bulldog. Anything new, like building a new team out or, doing something that's odd, nobody else really wanted to do. I wasn't quite the proctoid mold. They would give it to me. And so I loved that. I loved new business development. So it made sense, going and starting a new company.
yeah, yeah. And I think the other huge takeaway in what you said there is know what you know, but then also know what you don't know. And I think that is an incredible asset, and not enough people have that. And that's one of the things that made me very successful when I was in sales, is that if one of my customers asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to, like I would tell them, like, I don't know. I wouldn't try to BS them through it. Like I would say, I
Yeah.
don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
I probably know somebody who does know. So, give me a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes, give me a day, and I will get that answer for you, even though I don't know it personally. I think, that again, that's an asset to know that and to be honest with people instead of trying to, again, just, wing it, so to speak. But the other component of that is then surrounding yourself with a team who has those skill
Absolutely.
sets that you don't. And it certainly seems like that's what you guys have done with what you're
So it's interesting you mentioned about the team. So we just had a meeting, our first big global meeting, brought everybody into Dallas because we're a remote team. Everybody's everywhere. We're a software company, and I had every one of them do strength finders. And what I've done with that is I've built entire teams off of understanding, where are our blind spots, right? We have a lot of people that are strategic. We have a lot of people that are good with selling, but where is it that we're missing, some skill set? And then when we go to make decisions, who it is we want to pull in that can help make those decisions and give feedback because they have a skill set that we're missing in there. And I actually built a high performance work team where we, off of those skill sets, where I said, hey, we've got to hire people now with these skills. And that's hard to do. Building a high performance work team is I've done it twice, and I think I've built out probably 20 or 30 teams in my entire career. So I really feel like it's applicable across life, and I surround me with people that help me understand. Like I'm still learning, right? And so I think that's the other thing is like you said, that it's don't BS people, right? That's an important thing because it doesn't help you, it doesn't help them, and it doesn't help the team. People love to be asked, hey, what does this mean? How can you help me? Everybody wants to feel part of something and contribute, and it's this give and take. So I absolutely love what you just said. I think you're spot on.
And I think another one of the major keys to a good leader is, surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you. Like a great leader isn't the guy who's the guy or the girl who is the smartest one in the room and doesn't want to be the smartest one. They want
Yes.
to surround themselves with people who are going to challenge them. Who are going to raise them up higher. And I think sometimes that's a misconception where the term leader and leadership, where they think like
Mm-hmm.
you're the only one steering the boat, and that truly is not. I mean, we had a terminology, a lot of times where the best leaders lead from behind, and
That's
are
right.
there to kind of guide the sled as opposed to pulling it forward, really kind of pushing their team to another level, but also pushing themselves to another level as well. And it seems like that's an approach you take too.
Well, I'm sure you've worked with people who don't lead from behind, or they don't have that servant leadership, and people are afraid to tell them the truth or to work with them. They speak a good story about, hey, I want everybody's feedback and I want collaboration, but they don't actually walk it, and they don't. And sometimes they just don't know how to do it. I mean, it's not something that's taught very well. So I'm with you, and I love that. I love doing things with people. I love to collaborate. I want to learn more. And not only that, I want people to be able to show their value to themselves and to the world. And that's important to bring that together. And that's my passion, working with people.
And I think, when you create an environment like that where your team, really does feel like they're valued, it just
Mhm.
elevates everything that you're trying to do. that point. I've been part of teams where, um, the leader didn't take our input, and you just kind of feel like, what am I doing here? Like I'm just kind of going through the motions, not valued here. So,
Yeah.
And obviously when you're building a large team, there's so many different components to that because there's so many different levels of leadership. So you've got to instill that same servant leadership philosophy into, the other leaders that are part of your team to raise everybody up. So what is your approach to, making those others who are in leadership positions around you understand that it's not about them, it's about building.
Yeah. Well, I think accountability is important, right? Clear expectations. And I think every company struggles with that because you're always pivoting, especially in startup, right? Everybody wears many hats. You might have to hop on a call one day and you're the finance guy. The next day you're the sales guy. The next day you're the procurement manager, right? And I think it's holding people accountable, but actually releasing control and giving them ownership. When someone can own something and not beating them up for mistakes, right? It's like, I remember the story and I can't remember. I wish I could remember who it was, but there was a realtor, a big, huge development company. There was a guy that came in, totally messed up a contract. They lost like a $1 million contract on something. And the guy thought for sure he was going to get fired, went into the room, and the CEO, he said, "Why would I fire you? I just spent $1 million, learning a mistake, learning something." And I think that's the thing is that, we get too caught up in the mistakes we make. Now you want to do things ethically, and you want to, if you owe someone something, or even, an apology, we don't apologize for things. And there's ways to do that without, making it look like the company messed up in a big way. But I think ownership, just let people own what they do and that they're good at it. Stop getting in the way of them performing and being successful. And that is hard to do because we all think we have the best ideas and the great ideas. And maybe your idea is even better, but is it that much better that you would hinder someone from being successful and actually getting things executed? If the job's getting done and it's successful, your idea doesn't have to be the idea that's executed.
And taking ownership is such a huge component of that because, once you do that, like that's when you can move forward. And I'll go back to my baseball coaching days on this story, but I remember a time we're playing a game. My center fielder, Mitch played the ball in the outfield. It was a routine fly ball. And Mitch played it. He came in on it when he should have went back on it. And then once he did field it, he was frustrated. He ended up, throwing a base behind the runner. So we ended up giving up an extra base and got out of the inning. And as he's coming off the field, I'm going toward him, because we're going to have a conversation. Before I could even say anything, it's just like, my bad. Like can't say what he said here, but
Yeah.
he owned it. Let's just say he owned
Yeah.
it. And at that point, I said, okay, there's nothing else I can say. I'm not going to, he
Right.
already knew
Yeah.
he had made a mistake. I'm not going to beat him up about it. And
Yeah.
he ended up coming up later in that next inning and getting a big hit for us and driving 2 runs. But had I beat him up after he'd already owned it, I don't think we would have had that same outcome. So
Yeah.
once they accept ownership, it's like, okay, now we can move forward. All right, we both understand what happened. Now
Yeah.
let's move forward. So
Yeah. And I like that ownership
thing.
because it ties into accountability, right? Own it, own the good, bad, and ugly with it. And let's just move forward and learn from the mistakes or pivot. How can we avoid that again? I really, really like that. It's more about owning something. It's better that you own it versus me have to drive accountability, right? And to instill that accountability in it so you're not having to, you always have to have KPIs, you always have to verify, trust type thing, but that becomes less of an issue when you've trained and allowed people to own it all.
So what is it about, it seems like you really thrive in building these teams, whether it's P&G or whether, now with the startup. So what is it about, your nature where you thrive on building these teams?
Yeah, I think some of it goes to my core of who I am. I'm a Christian, and so for me, I want to see the best in people. I want them to succeed. I want to build community. I want people to have great experiences of interacting with people and growing themselves personally. And so I like the idea of building a community. Like one of the things I loved at Starbucks, I mean, their concept of what they came up with, was at a time when community was being lost. Usually it was around, moms and families did Girl Scouts, and that family unit was really strong years ago, and that family unit isn't as strong as it used to be. So trying to build a community where people feel valued and come together and they can share their stories. And I even think it's, even if you don't agree with people on different things, there's a way to build community on what you do agree upon. And so it's my passion. People are my passion, and giving them the opportunities in this life to be able to really thrive and grow and then pass that on to other people, because it becomes contagious, right? That whole thing of growing people and helping people should become contagious. It's what changes, it's really what changes the world, not all the politics, not all the other things that happen. It's people investing in other people's lives and coming together as a community that really does make change, and in a positive way, not in a negative way. So I really feel we've lost that. And I feel like Starbucks years ago captured that and kind of lost it now with what they're doing. But I feel like that's what I love. I have passion for people, and I grew up in a large family. So, I've got 6 siblings. My grandmother, who has passed away, I think if she was here, she's up to over 300 grandchildren and great grandchildren. So when I say I have a big family, it's pretty extensive. So I feel like I learned that about. I'm close to all my brothers and sisters. I do have a sister that struggled with drugs, and we know sometimes where she's at and where she's not at. So I've seen the heartache of, when my father passed away and not having, my stepdad had never had children, didn't know how to raise children really. And so she kind of got forgotten and lost in that mix because she was very young. So I grieve that, and I want to bring other people in so they don't have to go through that again. Right. And so it's just that whole community that's built with a family, a larger family, and what I've learned from that, and the leadership my mom has had, and my grandmother, and my aunts and uncles, and just coming together. And all my siblings have, if you were to go talk to any of my 5 of the 6 siblings, they're very similar to who I am, because that was driven in us when we were younger, to build that community and to share and to be part of each other's lives and to support each other.
Yeah, I love that. So construction is a very, very male-dominated industry.
Mm.
What are some of the challenges that you faced as a female in a male-dominated industry, and what have you done to overcome?
One is I don't allow things that men might say affect me, right? You've got to kind of have that, you've got to look through, and I don't like to always say it all the time, but the BS, right? You look beyond the outer core to people, and you look into who they are, get a picture of who they are, because you don't know what people have been through. You don't know their struggles. So it's looking beyond the veneer and really trying to go in deep and understand them, and looking at everybody as my brother or sister. How would I treat my brother? What would I want to say to my brother in this situation, or how they treated me or reacted? And I think sometimes people are blown away because it's not this, you react the same way, a tit for tat kind of thing, right? And so acting differently, behaving differently with people actually pulls them in. And surprisingly, their next reaction's a little bit different, and they have a little bit more respect for you, right? So I think that's key in how I've survived through that. And I also think it's pulling women up in that, really helping them tell their stories. I think a lot of the time, the women's organizations, and I think they've changed quite a bit, to be honest, they focus too much on, the women aspect, and not bringing along the men. I mean, most of these women have sons, right, and daughters, right? So you want your son to understand how to treat people respectfully. So it still stems from that core family unit about what are you doing as a woman to train your son of how to treat and respect other women. How do you treat and respect your sister, right? And so my mom was very clear we were equal in the family. She never put up with us treating each other differently or unequal. And she wouldn't allow my brothers to bully us and, which they could have. I was sandwiched between two boys. So I've got a lot of, I've done a lot of capture the flag and whatever they did, I did, right? So I was a little tom girl when I was younger, but she taught that respect in the family unit. And I think that has also been lost. Think about 15, 20, 30 years from now. Who do you want your son to be? How do you want him to treat his wife, his girls, and other women in the industries that he's in? And I actually think technology is changing that. There are so many women now coming up that want to be welders, that I've got a lot of women friends around me in their 20s and 30s, and they've got a hammer and they're tearing up their house and they're putting in cabinets. So I do feel like the window is open for people to feel free, because this younger generation, if there's one thing that's happening there, people are trying out new careers and trying new things, so I'm very hopeful of where that begins. And I think technology will change that as well.
So April, we've covered a lot of different topics. Is there anything that we missed that would be valuable to the listeners?
No, I just, first of all, I just commend you for your stories, your books. I think they're fabulous, honoring your mother the way you did. I think this children's storybook that you've got coming out is absolutely fun, the way that you're, trying to tap into lives at a younger age. And so I'm very appreciative of your podcast and what you're doing. I think it's incredibly helpful to everybody, no matter what the industry is. So first, thank you there. And thank you very much for letting me tell my story.
Absolutely. So April, how would people find you or find out more about what you're doing? Where can they kind of dig in and just find out more?
Yeah, so they can go to digibuild.com. They can reach out to me at April at DigiBuild, and DigiBuild is DigiBuild.com. Or they can find me on LinkedIn. Just type in April Moss LinkedIn and reach out to me there.
Awesome. April, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People, in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of the Michael Franti song Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that April does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
To give back to everybody that's in my little circle every day, and words of encouragement, giving them the opportunity to serve, to show their skills, to use those. Every day I try to give that back to each person that's around me in my life. And I don't do it perfectly, but that's absolutely what I try to do. And then personally, my mom's just moved in with us, and she's given a lot, sacrificed a lot in her life. And so every day I try to serve her in some way, whether it's bringing her coffee or some kind word. Again, not perfect in it, but that's what I try to do every day.
Folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeyofmymotherson.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of the books. And again, April, I really appreciate taking the time to have this conversation, and wish you nothing but the best of luck here.
Thanks so much, Dan.